The wind moved through the grass in slow waves, carrying a faint chill and the distant call of night birds. Travelers along the valley trail often spoke of strange sounds drifting from the hills, but few ever followed them. It was the kind of place people passed through without stopping, a lonely stretch of land where silence said more than words. On most days, the valley felt calm. On this one, it carried a story waiting to be discovered, a story that would soon leave people talking in pure disbelief. It began with the mustang. Before anyone knew what had happened, the wild horse had vanished from its band. Locals had seen the mustang many times before, moving with the quiet pride that only a free-born creature carried. Its coat, once bright, had dulled in recent weeks. Something was wrong, though no one expected the truth to be as heartbreaking as it turned out to be. The mustang had grown weak, struggling to keep up. Illness had wrapped around it slowly, and predators in the area had started following from a distance, shadows waiting for the moment nature gave them permission to move in. Most wild horses disappear without a sign, nature taking its course, but this mustang's fate took a darker turn. One morning, a trapper passing through the area noticed broken brush, hoof marks, and a trail that looked wrong. It was the kind of trail that suggested someone had dragged something heavy. People assumed it was a hunter hauling supplies or maybe someone pulling firewood. No one looked too deeply into it. Not at first. A few hours later, everything changed when a young herder named Cole rode into town after making his rounds through the outer fields. He spoke of hearing a strange cry echoing from the ridge. It wasn't the sharp call of an injured animal. It sounded almost like a plea. The townsfolk didn't pay much attention at first. Strange sounds were not unusual in the valley, especially near the rocky cliffs where echoes twisted in every direction. But the look in Cole's eyes said this was different. As whispers spread, a small group gathered near the edge of the trading post, listening to Cole repeat what he had heard. He insisted the cry was close, no more than a short ride from his grazing fields. Curiosity stirred, concern followed. People began wondering if a traveler had fallen or if some domestic animal needed help. No one imagined a mustang was involved. But Cole's final words made everyone go quiet. He said he heard snarls too and the soft padding of wolves moving through the grass. Wolves had always been part of the land, keeping to themselves unless hunger pushed them nearer to human paths. Folks here respected them and knew they were simply doing what nature required. Even so, the thought of a helpless creature trapped near them created a tension that spread through the group like wildfire. Something was out there, and it needed help. By late afternoon, a rescue party formed. Cole led the way with 2 ranch hands and an older man named Jeb, who was known for tracking lost cattle. Their horses moved steadily up the ridge as the sun dropped lower, painting the sky with warm color. Each turn of the trail brought new signs. A length of rope caught on a thorn bush. Fresh hoof marks pressed deeply into the dirt. Broken branches. The group exchanged uneasy glances. They were following the same dragged trail the trapper had seen hours earlier. Their questions grew heavier with each passing moment. Who had tied something to a rope? Why had it been dragged into a remote part of the ridge? And more importantly, why did the trail look rushed, almost frantic, as if whoever had done it wanted to get away quickly? When they reached the top of the rise, the wind shifted. The smell of dust and damp earth hung thick in the air. Birds had gathered in the trees above, unusually silent. It was then that Jeb lifted a hand, signaling the others to stop. He pointed toward a shaded cluster of trees. Something was there, motionless yet unmistakably alive. The mustang lay tied to the trunk of a twisted tree, its coat dull and its sides rising and falling in slow, weak breaths. The rope cut into its skin, and the earth around it showed marks where it had tried to stand. Whoever abandoned it had left in a hurry. The wolves were not far either. Tracks circled the clearing, fresh enough to send a shiver through everyone present. The animals had been close, watching, waiting for the moment the horse could no longer move. For a long moment, the group could only stare. This was beyond simple cruelty. It was deliberate. Someone had left the mustang as bait. Whether for wolves or for another reason, no one could say yet. But the truth felt wrong in every way. Jeb crouched beside the horse, speaking softly to keep it calm. Cole looked around the clearing, scanning the brush for movement. The ranch hands kept their horses steady, eyes fixed on the tree line in case the wolves returned. The mustang lifted its head slightly when Jeb touched its mane, its eyes clouded with exhaustion. Even in its weakened state, there was something striking about it, a spirit that hadn't fully given up. The air felt heavier as the group worked to free it. Every sound made someone flinch. A twig snapped in the distance. A breath of wind rustled leaves. Shadows shifted near the rocks. Tension pulled tight like a rope stretched to its limit. They all knew they had limited time before the wolves circled back to reclaim what they believed was theirs. Cole kept watch on the ridge, gripping his reins with a growing sense of urgency. He had ridden these hills his entire life and knew when something was close. The lookout point gave him a wide view of the valley below, and what he saw there made his heart pound faster. Shapes moved in the tall grass, low to the ground and closing in again. He turned to warn the others, but before the words left his mouth, the mustang suddenly shifted, letting out a tired, fearful sound that pushed the group into action. One ranch hand reached for a blade to cut the rope. Jeb whispered steady reassurances to the horse. Cole took a step toward them, urging them to hurry. The sun had nearly dipped beneath the horizon now, and the wolves were growing bolder in the dimming light. The moment the rope loosened, the mustang tried to rise. Its legs trembled beneath it, and its body swayed. Strength alone wasn't enough. It needed help. Cole rushed in to support its weight, feeling the animal lean heavily against him. Jeb glanced toward the ridge again, worry etched across his face. They had freed the horse, but getting it out of the clearing was another challenge entirely. Time was running thin, the light fading fast. The wolves had paused for the moment, watching from the grass below, waiting for their chance. The rescuers needed a plan, and they needed it quickly. As the mustang struggled to stand, its breath shaky but determined, the ridge echoed with a distant howl. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far enough. The sound sent a ripple of fear through the group. They exchanged tense looks, fully aware that their situation had just grown more dangerous. The mustang lifted its head weakly, as if sensing the danger too. Cole tightened his grip on its halter. Jeb steadied the rope, and the ranch hands shifted their horses into position. They were surrounded by fading light, gathering shadows, and the certainty that whatever came next would decide the fate of the rescued mustang. The valley went quiet again, holding its breath, as if waiting to see what choice the rescuers would make and whether they would manage to guide the weakened animal to safety before the wolves closed in. The ridge felt tighter around them as the mustang tried once more to find its footing. Its legs wobbled, and Cole steadied it with both hands, speaking in a low, calm voice meant only for the horse. The ranch hands kept circling, forming a loose shield with their own mounts. Jeb kept glancing toward the grass where the shapes had vanished, listening for any sign of movement. The wind cooled as the sun slipped lower, and every shifting shadow felt alive, as if the land itself was holding secrets just below the surface. The mustang leaned heavily on Cole again. Its breath trembled, and though weak, the horse had a spark that refused to go out. Jeb placed a hand on its shoulder and felt the rhythm of its breathing. There was illness in the mustang, that much was clear. The way its body weakened, the dullness in its eyes, the slow rise and fall of its sides. But it wasn't just sickness that had brought the horse to this point. Something else had happened, something done by human hands. The rope burns around the mustang's legs told a story of struggle, and the deep knots in the rope showed someone had tied it tightly and without any care for the animal. Cole felt a swell of anger rise inside him, not loud or wild, but steady like a flame fed by cold air. He had grown up riding through these hills, learning every trail and every sign of wildlife. A mustang was a symbol of freedom around here. To see one treated like this felt wrong in a way that stayed deep in a person's chest. But there wasn't much time to think. The mustang's body shuddered, and Cole motioned for the ranch hands to move closer. They positioned their horses so the mustang had more support, creating a barrier between it and the open clearing. Jeb whispered for everyone to stay calm, knowing nervous energy could spook a weak horse at the worst moment. The wolves were still out there, waiting for the chance to close in again. Jeb scanned the land around them. His eyes moved over the ridge, the brush, the scattered rocks. He noticed marks in the dirt he hadn't seen earlier. Boot prints, not made by any of the men standing here. They were deeper, pressed hard into the earth like someone had been moving fast or dragging weight. Jeb followed them with his gaze, tracing the line between the prints and the clearing. Whoever tied the Mustang to that tree had come through here and left in a hurry. He knelt to look closer, brushing dirt away with his fingertips. The tracks pointed downhill toward a narrow path few people used anymore. Brush had grown over most of it, but something heavy had moved through recently, clearing enough space for someone determined or desperate. Jeb didn't mention it right away. He didn't want to alarm the others more than they already were, but the thought pressed into him, heavy and unwelcome. Someone knew this horse was up here. Someone might even be watching now. The Mustang finally managed to stand upright with Cole supporting it from one side and a ranch hand steadying it from another. Its legs trembled but held. The animal lifted its head, ears twitching faintly. It looked toward the valley as if searching for the familiar sight of open plains. Cole gave the rope a gentle tug, and the Mustang took one step forward. A small victory, but a victory all the same. They began guiding it toward the trail they had ridden in on. Slow progress meant every step mattered. The sky dimmed to a deep shade, and the distant howl rose again, softer this time but no less chilling. Cole exchanged a glance with Jeb, and the older man gave a firm nod. They had to move. But moving meant entering a narrow trail where the brush grew thick, and visibility dropped quickly. Wolves could slip behind them unnoticed. Jeb weighed their choices, each one filled with its own risks. Staying in the clearing wasn't safe. Taking the ridge path would slow them down. Heading downhill toward the abandoned trail might lead them into whoever left the horse tied here. None of these choices offered comfort. He signaled the group to pause. They stopped near a cluster of rocks. The Mustang lowered its head, breathing heavily, while Cole rubbed its neck, trying to reassure it. The valley below stretched wide and darkening. The grass swayed in the breeze, tall enough to hide anything moving low through it. The ranch hands kept their horses turning slightly, creating a slow, protective circle. Jeb finally spoke. His voice carried the weight of someone who had faced danger before. He suggested they take the ridge trail back the way they came. It wasn't perfect, but at least they knew the path. Cole agreed, though he worried whether the Mustang could handle the climb. But the downhill route felt wrong. The prints were too fresh, too deliberate. No one went that way unless they had a reason. As they prepared to move again, something glinted faintly in the dirt near the base of the rocks. Cole spotted it first and bent down to pick it up. It was a small metal ring, the kind used on gear or pack straps. It had dirt packed into the edges and scratches along the side. Someone had dropped it recently. Cole handed it to Jeb, who turned it over in his palm, frowning. It wasn't the kind of item a traveler usually lost by accident. It looked like something ripped loose, maybe during a struggle. Cole looked toward the brush again. The shapes had vanished, but the tension remained sharp. He slid the ring into his pocket, planning to show it to someone who might recognize its design later. Right now, the Mustang came first. They started up the ridge trail. The Mustang stumbled several times, but each time Cole steadied it, whispering soft words. The horse's breathing grew louder, and sweat dampened its coat. Every part of its body showed strain, yet it kept moving forward, driven by some instinct deeper than fear. The rescuers stayed alert, leaves rustled, rocks shifted. The sound of the wolves drifted from another angle now, as if they were circling for a better position. As they continued, the rising moon cast a pale light across the ridge. It illuminated the trail just enough for them to see the outline of the path. The land felt older, quieter, with a tension that didn't come from wolves alone. Jeb slowed his horse near a narrow bend and studied the ground again. More prints. Not from wolves? Not from any of their horses? Something else. Human. The discovery tightened his expression. He motioned Cole closer and pointed. The tracks led ahead of them, faint but still visible. Someone had walked this trail recently, not long before they arrived. That meant the person may still be nearby. Cole's grip on the rope tightened. The Mustang shifted beside him, sensing the unease. The ranch hands felt it too. Their horses pricked their ears, listening intently. A branch snapped in the distance, not loud but enough to freeze the group in place. Cole held the mustang still, his breath caught in his chest. Jeb scanned the brush, every muscle alert. The sound didn't repeat, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger. They moved on slower now. Caution sat heavy on each step. The mustang struggled again as the trail steepened, and Cole stopped to let it rest. He could feel the tremble in its muscles. Jeb approached and examined the horse's eyes, noticing a strain that went beyond illness. The mustang wasn't just fighting weakness. It was fighting fear, as if remembering something terrible. Cole wondered if the horse had belonged to someone before it fell sick. Maybe someone had tried to treat it and failed. Maybe desperation had led to bad choices. But the tightness in the knots, the sharp edges of the rope burns, the hidden trail, and the metal ring all pointed to something darker. This wasn't a simple case of abandonment. Someone wanted this horse gone. The howls rose again, closer now. The rescuers exchanged quick looks. They had to move, no matter the risk. Cole steadied the mustang again, urging it onward. The ranch hands flanked them, ready for anything. Jeb took the lead, guiding them through the tightest part of the ridge. As they moved, a soft rustle came from behind them. Cole turned sharply. Nothing obvious stood there, but the tension didn't fade. The land felt alive in a way that made the hair on his arms rise. The rustle came again, this time from a different direction. The wolves weren't the only ones trailing them. They reached a wider stretch of trail where the ridge opened slightly. Relief flickered through the group. They could rest here a moment, regroup, let the mustang breathe. But before anyone spoke, Cole noticed something in the dirt near the edge of the opening. Footprints again. This time fewer and closer together, as if someone had paused right there, watching the valley below. Jeb followed Cole's gaze and felt the same cold realization. They weren't the first to stand on this spot today. Someone had been ahead of them, someone silently tracking the same path. Someone who might have been there during the mustang's suffering. The group grew quiet, listening to every shift in the wind, every distant call from the valley. The mustang pressed closer to Cole, leaning its tired body against him. He placed a steadying hand on its neck and looked toward the darkened trail ahead. They had saved the horse from the wolves for now, but something else was out there in the hills. Something that wasn't finished with this mustang. And as the moon climbed higher, the ridge held its breath again, waiting to reveal what would come next. The ridge felt colder as night settled in, though the breeze stayed light enough to keep the scents of pine and earth drifting through the air. The mustang rested for a moment, its breathing heavy, its legs shaking from the strain of the climb. Cole kept a steady hand on its neck, whispering calm words while staying alert to every sound around them. The quiet of the ridge wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that hid movement, the kind that made every instinct sharpen. The group stood in a loose circle, trying to catch their breath. The ranch hands exchanged uneasy looks, their horses shifting beneath them. Jeb had ridden ahead a few steps, studying the trail that curved sharply around a group of rocks. His eyes traced the ground, searching for signs of what or who had passed through earlier. The footprints he had seen were still in his mind. Someone was ahead, watching or waiting, and that thought refused to settle. Cole felt the mustang tremble again. The poor animal was exhausted, but every time it lowered its head it tried to lift it again. There was fight left in it. A quiet spirit that didn't want to give up. Cole admired that, even as worry gnawed at him. Saving the mustang wasn't going to be simple. There was more to its suffering than wolves or sickness. Something hidden lingered around this horse like a shadow. As the moon brightened the ridge, Jeb called for Cole to join him. Cole handed the rope to one of the ranch hands and walked toward the older man. Jeb pointed to the ground. There were two sets of footprints now, overlapping in places. One led forward along the trail. The other came from the opposite direction and stopped at the edge of the ridge. From there, the person had stood long enough to mark the dirt, then turned back the way they came. Someone had been near the group's earlier path, maybe watching them approach the clearing. Cole felt a chill rise in his spine. Whoever tied the mustang to that tree hadn't simply abandoned it. They might have been waiting to see what happened next. The idea made the night grow heavier. Jeb lowered his voice. He said they couldn't rule out the chance that someone intended to cover their tracks by letting the wolves finish the job. If the Mustang died out here, most folks would just say nature took over. But that ring Cole found, the drops of rope fiber near the tree trunk, the hidden trail, and now the boot prints all pointed to a person who wanted the horse gone without being blamed. Cole clenched his jaw. The idea made anger settle deeper in his chest. This wasn't just about rescuing a weak animal anymore. It was about uncovering something behind it, something bigger. They walked back to the group. The Mustang lifted its head as Cole approached, as if recognizing his presence. He took the rope again and steadied the horse. They needed to move soon, but the ridge trail was narrow, and the danger of being followed stayed close in Cole's thoughts. Before they continued, Jeb made the ranch hands check their surroundings. One of them rode around a small ledge to look down the slope. He came back tense, saying he spotted movement in the grass below, but it was too dark to tell whether it was wolves or someone hiding low. The uncertainty added more weight to the moment. No one could tell where the real danger was coming from. They started forward again, choosing the ridge despite the risk. Cole stayed close to the Mustang, guiding it gently. Jeb took the lead, scanning the land ahead. The ranch hands moved behind, keeping their eyes on the shadows. The Mustang stumbled once, nearly falling to its knees, but Cole held tight, and the ranch hands shifted closer to help brace it. The trail grew steeper before leveling out near a narrow pass between two rock faces. This pass was known for echoing sounds. Even the faintest noise bounced in strange ways. Tonight, that echo twisted their footsteps into something that felt like someone else walking nearby. Cole knew it was only the stone playing tricks, but that didn't make it easier to ignore. Halfway through the pass, the Mustang froze. Its body tightened, and it refused to take another step. Cole felt the tension through the rope and looked around. Nothing moved. Nothing sounded out of place. But the Mustang kept staring toward a cluster of rocks at the far end of the pass, its ears angled forward, its breathing sharper. Animals sensed danger long before people did. Cole didn't question that. Jeb lifted a hand to stop everyone. They waited, listening. A faint scrape came from somewhere among the rocks ahead. Not loud, but too deliberate to be made by wind. The ranch hands reached for their reins, steadying their horses. Cole kept a hand on the Mustang, trying to keep it calm. A small rock tumbled down the slope, bouncing lightly before landing near the trail. Jeb urged the group backward a few feet. No one spoke. For a long moment, they waited for something more. But the pass turned quiet again. Whatever moved had changed position or slipped behind the rocks. Jeb whispered that they needed to choose whether to risk the pass or detour through the lower ridge where the wolves might be closer. Neither choice felt right, but standing still was worse. Before they could decide, Cole noticed something near the base of the rocks ahead. A piece of torn cloth caught on a jagged edge. It fluttered slightly in the breeze. Someone had passed that spot recently, enough for the cloth to still cling to the rock. Jeb gave a grim nod. Whoever it was had moved ahead of them, not behind. That meant they weren't being followed for now. They were being led deeper into uncertain ground. Cole didn't like it, but they pressed on. The Mustang stepped carefully, though its legs shook with every stride. Cole whispered steadying words, hoping to keep the horse's courage from slipping. When they reached the end of the pass, the land opened into another stretch of ridge. From here, they could see faint lights from the outer edge of town, far off in the distance. Relief flickered through the group. They weren't close yet, but they were closer than before. Still, the danger wasn't behind them. It followed beside them like a shadow. They moved toward a cluster of scrub bush where the trail widened. As the Mustang paused for air, Cole noticed another set of hoof marks in the dirt. These weren't from wild horses. They were from a shod horse, meaning someone on horseback had been through recently. The tracks were fresh, maybe an hour old. They led toward the ridge's lower path. Jeb joined Cole and studied the ground. He looked troubled. Whoever tied the Mustang wasn't traveling on foot only. They had a mount, and they knew the hidden routes well. They had been circling around the ridge, watching the same land the rescuers were crossing. Cole wondered why. Why go through so much trouble over one sick Mustang? The question grew larger in his mind the more he thought about it. Maybe the horse wasn't just a wild Mustang, maybe it had a past. A reason someone didn't want it alive. The Mustang lifted its head, breathing hard. Its eyes glimmered faintly in the moonlight, clearer now than before, as if hearing the same questions in its own way. Cole felt a connection he didn't fully understand. This horse had survived something cruel, and whatever it wasn't finished. The group pressed on, following the trail that curved along the ridge. Below, the valley stretched into darkness. The rustle of grass carried upward, every sound feeling too close. Wolves called again, but this time the howls came from two different directions. Cole felt the Mustang tense. The night was closing in around them. As they reached another bend, something unexpected caught Jeb's eye. A broken piece of wood, half buried in dirt. He picked it up. It was part of a wooden post carved with a symbol. Cole recognized it immediately. It belonged to a small holding near the edge of town, a place known for taking in horses, even those no longer strong enough to work. The mark belonged to a man who had recently left the area after facing trouble in a livestock dispute. Jeb looked at Cole, their suspicion deepening. If the Mustang came from that holding, then the man who left had most likely taken the horse with him. And if he abandoned it here in the ridge, he didn't want anyone finding it alive. The pieces didn't fit together neatly yet, but the picture forming was troubling. Cole tightened his grip on the rope. The Mustang leaned close to him again. The ranch hands shifted their mounts, scanning the darkness. Jeb studied the symbol once more before tucking the wood into his saddlebag. Whatever truth hid behind the Mustang's suffering wasn't lost to the ridge. It was still out there, waiting to surface. The land around them held more secrets than they realized. And as they moved deeper along the path, the night whispered with danger, pushing them toward answers they weren't ready to face. The trail narrowed again as the group pushed farther along the ridge, and the sky deepened into a darker shade of blue. The Mustang kept fighting to stay upright, though its legs shook every few steps. Cole stayed beside it, one hand steady on the rope and the other ready to brace the horse whenever it staggered. Jeb moved ahead, studying every mark in the dirt, every bent blade of grass, every sign that pointed toward who had been there before them. The ranch hands formed a protective line behind, watching the path they had crossed and the valley below, where shadows shifted in ways no one could clearly explain. Nothing about the night felt familiar anymore. The land that usually felt open and calm now held tension at every turn. Even the breeze seemed thinner, almost as if it carried warnings instead of comfort. The Mustang flicked its ears back and forth, alert to something in the darkness. Cole whispered softly to it again, hoping to keep the horse calm enough to continue. Jeb stopped suddenly near a rocky outcrop. Cole moved the Mustang forward until he could see what had caught the older man's attention. A set of hoof tracks and boot prints crossed the trail, heading toward a cluster of trees on a slope that curved downward. They were fresh, too fresh. Cole felt his stomach tighten. Someone was close. Closer than he had expected. The ranch hands exchanged cautious glances. They shifted their horses into position, widening the space around the Mustang. The air grew heavier. Even the wolves stayed quiet for a moment, as if they sensed a different kind of danger moving through the ridge. Jeb crouched near the prints and touched the dirt with the back of his fingers. It was still warm from recent wait. Whoever had walked here had passed not long ago. Cole watched the older man straighten slowly, a frown forming across his face. He didn't need to say anything. They all understood the message. Someone who knew the ridge trails was moving ahead of them, staying just out of reach. The Mustang let out a soft, uneven breath. Cole stroked its neck, but the horse remained tense. It stared toward the slope where the prints led, its body angled as if it wanted to move in that direction. Cole wondered again whether the Mustang recognized something, a scent, a memory, something tied to the person they were following. Jeb motioned for everyone to keep moving. They didn't have time to investigate the slope. Wolves could start closing in again, and the Mustang might not have the strength to outrun them. Still, the knowledge that someone dangerous was just ahead changed the way they traveled. They moved more quietly, more carefully. The ridge around them felt alive with unseen movement. As they rounded another bend, the moon lit up a stretch of open trail that dipped slightly before climbing back up. The Mustang stumbled again, nearly falling, but Cole managed to pull it upright. The horse gave a strained snort. Pain radiated through its body, yet it kept stepping forward. Cole admired its will, even as worry pressed deeper into him. Jeb slowed his horse and waited for everyone to catch up. He pointed ahead. A small fire had been built near the next rise. It was no longer burning, but the ash was still warm, glowing faintly beneath a thin layer of dirt. Someone had covered it quickly, trying to hide the fact that they had stopped there. Cole felt the Mustang shift nervously as they approached the fire pit. Something about the scent bothered the horse. Jeb searched the area and discovered tracks circling the small camp. Whoever rested there had stayed long enough to move around, possibly scouting for something or someone. The thought made Cole's pulse quicken. They had been watched. One of the ranch hands found a broken strap near a bush. It looked like it belonged to a saddlebag. Cole took it and inspected the stitching. The piece looked worn, as if it belonged to gear someone had used for years. He wondered whether it belonged to the same person who lost the metal ring earlier. If so, then they were getting closer to whoever had abandoned the Mustang. The group pressed on, moving faster. The tension grew with each step, building into something that settled into everyone's bones. The ridge ahead rose sharply before leveling into a plateau. Jeb said the plateau would give them a wide view of the land and help them see whether anyone was still moving ahead of them. Cole nodded, though he knew it would also expose them. The Mustang struggled harder as the climb steepened. Cole and one ranch hand supported it from both sides. Sweat darkened the horse's coat. The illness that weakened it was taking a toll, but the horse refused to stop. Cole whispered encouragement, and the Mustang pressed forward, driven by something deeper than simple survival. When they finally reached the plateau, the wind opened across the land, sharp and cool. The valley stretched wide below them, but the first thing Cole noticed wasn't the view. It was a lone horse standing near the far edge of the plateau, tied loosely to a fallen log. The horse lifted its head when the group arrived. Its saddle was worn and one side looked damaged as if torn during a struggle. Jeb's face darkened with recognition. The horse belonged to the man who had left town weeks earlier after the dispute. That meant the man was somewhere close, maybe hiding among the rocks or behind the brush. The Mustang tensed hard, muscles tightening beneath its weak frame. Cole scanned the plateau. Shadows moved across the land below, but none were close enough to identify. The ridge held its breath again, waiting for something to happen. The ranch hands fanned out, searching for signs of the missing man. Jeb examined the ground near the tied horse and found scuffed marks where boots had shifted quickly, almost as if someone left in a hurry after noticing the rescue party approaching. The Mustang stared toward the rocks near the plateau's edge. Cole followed its gaze. Something about that direction felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Jeb moved toward the rocks cautiously. Cole kept the Mustang steady and watched. The ranch hands circled wide to cover more ground. Every footstep sounded louder than it should, echoing off the stone. Jeb paused near a large boulder. He placed a hand on it and leaned slightly, listening. Cole waited, hardly breathing. The Mustang shifted, one hoof scraping the dirt. Then Jeb stepped back quickly. He had found something. A piece of rope with fibers that matched the rope that had been tied around the Mustang. This was proof. The same person had been here, watching the ridge, moving ahead of them, waiting for something. Cole felt the same chill he had felt earlier, now sharper. The man was close. Too close. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying a faint sound. A rustle, a footstep. Not from behind, but from the lower side of the plateau where the land sloped toward a narrow ravine. Cole and Jeb turned at the same time. The Mustang jerked its head, pulling Cole forward slightly. Something or someone was moving down there, just out of sight. The ranch hands rode toward the edge, but Jeb signaled them to stop. He didn't want anyone to rush into danger blindly. Cole could feel the Mustang trembling again, but not from weakness. The horse recognized the presence. It wasn't fear. It was memory. Jeb moved slowly toward the slope, his posture cautious. Cole kept his eyes on the ravine. The ranch hands positioned themselves in a wide arc. The mustang stepped forward on its own, pulling Cole along. A figure rose halfway up the slope. The moonlight touched only part of him, enough to show the outline of a man carrying something in his hand. He stepped onto the ridge path leading up to the plateau, head lowered slightly, as if preparing for confrontation. Cole tightened his grip on the mustang. Jeb stepped forward, shoulders squared. The ranch hands steadied their reins. The man took another step, and the mustang gave a shaky, weary cry that cut through the night. Cole felt the full weight of the moment settle around them. The truth behind the mustang's suffering was no longer hiding in shadows. It was climbing the slope toward them, carrying answers no one was ready to hear. And the ridge seemed to tighten, as if drawing breath for what was about to unfold. The moment the danger broke, and the injured mustang and the rancher were pulled from the chaos, something inside everyone seemed to shift. The storm that had been boiling overhead finally weakened, rolling away toward the distant hills. The valley grew quiet in a way none of them had heard in days. Even the wind felt softer, almost as if it understood that the long struggle had reached its turning point. The mustang stood, trembling but upright, leaning gently against the rancher who had risked everything to protect him. The animal's sides still shivered from fear and exhaustion, yet there was a new steadiness in his eyes. It was as if he finally realized he was no longer alone. The rancher wiped the dirt from his cheek and kept one arm under the mustang's neck. He whispered to him in a calm, low tone, not asking anything of him, only offering comfort. The men and women who had come rushing to help stayed a few steps back. They understood that, after everything the mustang had lived through, the last thing he needed was a crowd pressing in. They let him breathe. They let the rancher be the one voice he heard. The horse turned his head slightly and pressed his muzzle into the rancher's shoulder, and that simple gesture brought a hush across everyone watching. It was the first sign of trust the mustang had given to anyone since the day he had been tied and left behind. They moved him slowly toward the shelter. Every step was measured and careful. The rancher walked at the same pace as the horse, letting the mustang set the rhythm. A few volunteers carried blankets, water, and simple supplies, but no one rushed forward. They all knew this moment was delicate. The mustang's legs wobbled as if he might fold at any second. The storm had soaked his coat, and the deep cold had set into his bones. But he kept moving, guided by the steady presence beside him. Inside the shelter the air was warm, and a lantern hanging near the door cast a soft glow. The rancher eased the mustang onto a dry bed of hay. He checked the wounds again, not with urgency but with patience. The horse watched every movement, alert but no longer panicked. The rancher spoke gently about the long path ahead. Healing would take time. The infection would need treatment. The mustang would have to regain strength he had long been denied. But the important part, he said, was that the horse no longer had to fight for survival alone. The others quietly set water and fresh hay nearby, then stepped outside to give them space. After a while, the rancher sat down beside the mustang, resting his back against the stall wall. The mustang lowered his head and breathed out slowly. The rancher listened to the sound, steady and warm, and felt the weight of the past days lift off his shoulders. For the first time since finding the abandoned horse, he believed everything might turn out fine. Morning brought a soft golden light that seeped into the shelter. The rancher woke to find the mustang standing over him, ears slightly forward, watching him closely. It was a simple sight, but powerful all the same. The mustang had found enough strength to stand through the night, and more importantly, he had not tried to flee or hide. He had chosen to stay. When the rancher rose to his feet and offered a quiet greeting, the mustang blinked slowly, almost like an answer. Help arrived in the form of an old healer who had spent a lifetime tending to worn-out livestock and wounded wild horses. He studied the mustang's injuries with careful eyes. The wounds were deep but healing. The fever had started to drop. The animal's body was responding to rest and care far better than anyone expected. The healer shook his head in quiet amazement. After what had been done to the horse, after being tied out and left in the open, after starving and fighting the cold, the fact that he was still standing seemed like a small miracle. He told the rancher that the mustang's survival spoke to a spirit that refused to break. Some animals had it, he said. Some held on even when the world pushed them past their limits. Over the next several days, the Mustang's recovery became the talk of the whole region. Word spread about the sick horse that had been abandoned for wolves, only to be rescued in the most unexpected moment. Families came riding from far-off homesteads to offer supplies. Travelers brought herbs and remedies from towns the rancher had never visited. People he had not seen in years knocked at his door asking if the story was true. They wanted to see the horse who refused to give up. The rancher kept visitors to a minimum to avoid overwhelming the animal, but he noticed something in all the faces that appeared. There was hope. Something about the Mustang's fight had struck deep in people's hearts. Days turned to weeks. The Mustang began to put on weight. His coat grew glossier. The wound marks started to fade into soft scars. The rancher spent hours each day nearby, not forcing himself on the horse, just being present. Sometimes he sat with a book. Sometimes he talked about his work. Other times he said nothing at all. The Mustang learned that his footsteps meant food, water, or calm company. Trust grew slow like a young tree taking root, but it grew. One afternoon, the rancher opened the gate to the small paddock outside the shelter. He didn't coax the horse. He simply left the door open and stepped aside. For a long while, the Mustang stood still, unsure. Then he took one step, then another. And then, with surprising quietness, he walked into the daylight. The breeze lifted his mane, his tail swished. He sniffed the air as if rediscovering the world. The rancher watched him circle the paddock, testing his legs, feeling the earth under him again. It was the first time he had walked freely since the day someone tied him down and walked away. That evening the rancher sat outside the paddock fence. The Mustang stood near him, close enough that the rancher could have touched him if he wanted, but he didn't reach out. The Mustang made the choice instead, leaning his head gently against the rancher's shoulder. It was a simple gesture, yet it felt like the final turning point. The rancher closed his eyes and breathed in the moment. After all the fear, the running, the danger, the doubt, the Mustang had given his answer. He wanted to stay. As the sky turned deep orange, the rancher looked over the valley. The land seemed calmer than it had in years. He thought back to the night he found the Mustang left for wolves, barely alive. That sight had stayed in his mind, reminding him how cruel people could be when they grew careless. But the sight before him now told the other side of the truth. It showed how much could change when someone stepped in, when someone refused to walk away. In the following weeks, the Mustang regained his full strength. The day he broke into a smooth trot, the rancher felt pride swell in his chest. The day the trot turned into a full run, he laughed out loud. The Mustang moved like the wind, swift and sure. His spirit had not only survived, it had risen. People who visited from nearby towns stood in quiet amazement watching the Mustang glide across the paddock. They spoke about the horse with respect. They told the story to others on long roads and in busy markets. The Mustang became a symbol of resilience, of fighting through hardship, of how unexpected kindness could turn the darkest moment into a new beginning. The rancher knew he could not keep the Mustang confined forever. The animal had been born with freedom in his blood. One clear afternoon he saddled his own horse and rode to the edge of the open land with the Mustang running beside him. He stopped at the ridge that overlooked miles of open valley and plains stretching toward the horizon. The Mustang slowed too and turned his head toward him. The rancher didn't say much. He didn't need to. He knew the Mustang understood. He swung down from his saddle and removed the rope that had been loosely looped for guidance only. The Mustang stood still, watching him with calm eyes. The rancher stepped back. The Mustang lifted his head, sniffed the wind, and then took a step forward, then another. And then he started running, not out of fear this time, but out of choice. His muscles moved with strength that had once seemed impossible. His mane streamed behind him, carrying the story of everything he had survived. The rancher watched until the Mustang became a moving shape in the distance. He felt a warmth spread through him that was part pride, part sadness, part joy. He knew he had given the Mustang his life back, and the Mustang had given something just as powerful in return, a reminder of what courage looked like, a reminder of what hope could do. As the mustang disappeared into the wide land, the rancher breathed in the quiet air. The story had come full circle. A sick mustang had once been tied and abandoned for wolves. Yet his rescue had amazed people across the region and changed more than one life. The rancher mounted his horse and turned back toward home, carrying a feeling he knew would stay with him forever. And somewhere across the valley, the mustang ran strong under the open sky, living the future that had once seemed impossible.